So there's this one little touch that I really like, right? So if you go into a certain track, you can actually see who the track favorite is, and it's going to be one of the pod races from across the series. So in this one, you got Toy Dampener, and then for Sebulba's Legacy, you've obviously got Sebulba, which is a nice touch. And then for Grabvine Gateway, you've got Anakin Skywalker of all people, which is a bit weird when you think about the fact that he never actually finished a race before he won the Boon to Eve Classic and Star Wars Episode 1 racer, so I don't know how he's the track favorite for anything. I'm just curious, who's the track favorite for Inferno? Ben Quadraneros, are you fuck?
Well, I've got my money on that little scrapper Rastus Rare. He may be small in stature, but he's got a couple of the biggest racing engines I've ever seen.
Now this is Podracing. Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Blue Maxima. Let's tackle the game I picked over Iggy's Wrecking Balls for my birthday present 15 plus years ago. One of the many actually good Star Wars games released before EA got their mitts on the license, Star Wars Episode 1 Racer. I decided to pick this one up due to the surprise release of the Switch port, which is where the footage you're seeing on screen comes from. Based off the ridiculously cool When You're Young sequence in The Phantom Menace, Racer has a couple of dozen races. The entire roster of pod racers make cameos from the movie, and even Watto has a ridiculous ditty based on the music from A New Hope if you win big. There's plenty of that prequel trilogy atmosphere going on. Everything is dirty, the massive machines feel run down, and the big beasts, while somewhat unimpressive thanks to the polygon count of the generation, still fit the part, and cameos including everything from sand crawlers to that one ship that gets the crap blown out of it at the beginning of the Phantom Menace are just neat little cameos. Racer is still fondly remembered today for just one thing though, and that's its pod racing. The machines have that distinct feel of floating above the ground, with the floaty skidding, the ridiculous air time, and the sense of speed is something else entirely. While F-Zero and Wipeout, which were its closest competitors at the time, have a good handle on speed, Racer beats them both on sheer scale, with massive caves, cities, anti-gravity tunnels, and everything in between going by at the speed of light. It really sells you on the small fish, giant pond experience, and the included, moderately dizzying, first-person camera really helps a lot with that too. And it's really helped out by the variety of track designs. There's over half a dozen unique locations with multiple variants on the track design, with ice planets, Bespin-like cloud machinery, massive jungles, and everything in between. The track types are all unique in their own way, with tight turns, big jumps, the previously mentioned anti-gravity tunnels, and secondary paths and shortcuts all over the place. It's slightly let down by some physics bugs introduced in this Switch version. Don't pull back on the analog stick when you go over these sorts of jumps, since it has this weird tendency to instantly kill you. There's more to the mechanics than just accelerating and turning though. The most important by far is boosting. You boost by holding forward and pressing a button when the meter fills up and you get a massive speed boost. But you can't hold it forever, otherwise your engine will explode. That's where repairing comes in. You can't go at full speed when you're repairing, but at least you won't be one hit from death if you hit the wall too many times. There's also a drift button, but it doesn't really come in any use throughout the game, so I don't really bother with it. This combination of high speed, boost managing racing, and the massive scale tracks really make for some memorable races. But you might have noticed the majority of this footage is me not actually seeing much in the way of opponents. Thanks to a relative lack of rubber banding, generally slow AI, and some uncomplicated track design, it can be incredibly easy to win the earlier races. Combine that with the clever use of the upgrade system, and you can steamroll the first two-thirds of the game, and it isn't too much harder afterwards, although, in that point, a few crashes probably will cost you a race. See, the game has a pretty easy to understand upgrade system. You have individual parts that up individual stats, everything from your grip to the ground, to your turning, to your top speed or what have you, and the different races have different base stats. Both new and used parts are available thanks to Watto's Junk Shop, with the more crashes you have damaging your parts and their capabilities, which makes used parts cheaper. You can even buy pit droids to repair your parts faster between races, meaning that badly damaged endgame parts are always worth buying, especially early on, because if you play in the winner takes all mode, play the races in order, buy all 3 of the pit droids, and buy the best parts you can from the junkyard, you'll be fully upgraded before the halfway point, luck befitting. I admit I've played through Racer a few times myself, so this might be easier than I'm letting on, but I absolutely blew through this version.
I got a lots of a junk.
That's not to say the game doesn't get at least somewhat difficult though. The layouts are much harder to deal with in the second half of the game, with the pod race from the movie not even being the end point, although it does roll the credits. You unlock a series of 4 tracks which are extraordinarily difficult when you beat the first 3 Grand Prix, and honestly, the one track that everybody talks about in this game is Abyss, which is so hard that it's one of the only tracks in the game which lets you let off the accelerator more than a couple of times. It's infamous for preventing 100% completion, and it isn't even the last track on the roster. The supplemental modes include a free run and a time attack mode, and 2-player split screen, with the Switch version supporting single Joy-Cons. There's no wireless or online of any kind, it's a pretty straight port. Racer is backed up in the sound department with selections from the Phantom Menace soundtrack, and I ain't gonna complain about John Williams backing up high-speed racing. That's something you don't see very often. My main issue with the music is that it just feels too big and too epic, especially in the earlier tracks that are relatively easy. Hell, you might hear Duel of the Fates as soon as you start the first race, which just doesn't feel right. From what I remember in the Nintendo 64 version, which was the one I grew up on as a kid, they actually saved Duel of the Fates for the Boonta Eve Classic, which is the final track in the main campaign, and the music doesn't even come in normally until you're on the final lap, which I felt was just the right balance. I'm not entirely sure why the PC version felt that it needed to make this change, but that's what they did. The music is also just a little bit too loud in the default mix between the music and the sound effects, and it's just that little bit off. Other than what I've already talked about, the Switch version of Racer still manages to fit the part, with smooth as silk 60 frames per second gameplay in handheld and docked, really helping the play control feel great. FMVs are preserved from the PC version just fine with no obvious compression. There's some slight graphical issues with clipping through certain objects, and the fog not being far back enough to cover render pop-in at certain times. It still even has the cheats, although I can't quite figure out what the combo is to activate them once you're in the race. If it weren't for the instant death jumps and these graphical niggles that I was talking about, it would be the best way to play Racer, bar none. Star Wars Episode 1 Racer remains a really enjoyable racing game to this day, even if the slight technical niggles and low difficulty curve betray its age. The price is pretty reasonable too, with at least a day's worth of racing behind that $15 price tag. Probably even cheaper once it decides to go on sale. It's still on PS4 and PC too, which will almost definitely go on sale sooner rather than later. It's easy to recommend, especially if it costs less than a coffee, if only to get a good laugh from running straight into a wall and hearing a hilarious alien death cry. This has been Blue Maxima, and I will see you all next time.